The Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 24th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Now on that same day, the first day of the week, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. And then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" And they replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on, but they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. And then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." And then they told what had happened on the road, and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
In today's text, it is still Easter Sunday. 2 of Jesus' disciples are on the road from Jerusalem to a small village called Emmaus, about 7 miles away. They had hoped that Jesus was the one to redeem Israel. And now, with his crucifixion and death, that hope is lost. In those days, a 7-mile walk was not considered arduous. But some walks are longer than others, not because of the miles or even because of the terrain, but because of the burdens one carries on the journey. And these 2 disciples, They were carrying heavy burdens. Disappointed, heartbroken, abandoned, forsaken, devastated, leaderless, without focus, fearful, dejected, very much alone. Their lives are completely in shambles. They had hoped that Jesus was the one to redeem Israel. They had hoped. And now, given the events of those 3 days, all hope is lost. We are also on the road. The road is an appropriate metaphor for the Christian life. We are all on the road, moving at different paces, mingling with different people, getting stuck, having to turn around, getting sidetracked, taking a wrong turn, suffering an injury, limping for a while, having to lean on others, or having to stop and rest for a while. We are all on this road of discipleship. These disciples, they had hoped that Jesus was the one to redeem Israel. The journey is long and arduous because their hearts are heavy and their disappointment in this text is palpable. We are also people who had hoped. We had great hopes for this year, 2020. We had great hopes for this spring, big plans for the summer. We had hoped. And now, due to the outbreak of coronavirus, many of our hopes and dreams and plans and goals have been decimated. This year held great promise for our congregation. This May, it will be 3 years since our congregation council made the decision to begin celebrating same-sex marriage. Things were finally settling down. The folks who could not handle such radical grace and hospitality have found new church homes, and new, brave, bold, beautiful souls have found a home with us. Sure, there are still people who want to challenge the decision, who wish that I would stop proclaiming a gospel that is so open and so accepting and so forgiving, so full of love and forgiveness and affirmation. Unless, of course, they are the ones in need of that grace. But far less of my time is spent in those conversations. We were finally beginning to embrace this mission that God has given us, to be a place of welcome and love and affirmation for all people, all without exception. And then the coronavirus attacked. But we had hoped that this would be the year. Our work to become a more accepting, more hospitable, more inclusive congregation was reaping benefits, especially in our relationship with our neighbors next door at Towers East. Through shared ministries, meals together at table, hot dog lunches on the front lawn, bingo afternoons in the multipurpose room, and worshiping together in this place, we were becoming community, becoming family. And now so much of that ministry cannot happen because of the virus. And I wonder a lot, will it be possible to just pick up where we left off? Or will we have to start all over again with this process of building, loving, and trusting relationships with our neighbors? We had so much hope. We had hoped the council and the stewardship committee, that at this 3-year anniversary of that significant decision, giving to support this ministry would stabilize. We were meeting benchmarks, had lots of support, even from folks who were not official members of this congregation. But now, in the midst of a pandemic, there is so much uncertainty. Our council was making great progress drafting a mission, vision, values statement. But that work has been halted. We had hoped to have it completed by summer. You see, each of us is in a unique position to understand what those disciples on the road are experiencing. We too had so many hopes, and we know what it is to have our hopes dashed. We, like those disciples, continue on the road. We are still making our way into a future that is both unknown and uncertain. It is very interesting that the gospel writer Luke uses this setting, 2 disciples engrossed in conversation while they walk, as one of the contexts for Jesus' resurrection. Most often we think of resurrection as the flash of God's triumph over death-dealing powers. And yet Luke gives us a different aspect of this resurrection event, one that is less flash of light and more the gentle probing of our heart's entanglements on the road to the next chapter in our lives. Those disciples of old were in a holding pattern, still stunned by the events of those 3 days. And we modern-day disciples, we are in a holding pattern, still stunned by the turn our lives have taken in the past 6 weeks. This gospel text seems perfect for us today. We are disciples of Jesus, and we are on the road. All we can do is keep putting one foot in front of the other. All we can do is continue moving. We cannot see over the mountains. There is no clear view of the horizon. The future is uncertain, but still we walk, still we move toward a future that God has already prepared for us. This text helps us see that this, and I mean everything about our lives right now, that this is the perfect setting for Christ to make a resurrection appearance. On the road between Jerusalem and Emmaus, and completely beside themselves with fear and dread, Christ comes to the disciples. On the road between our lives before the pandemic and only glimpsing into our lives after the pandemic, with hearts full of fear and dread, Christ will surely come to us as well. Do you understand what this means? Do you see the significance of this text for us right now? Right now, in the midst of physical distancing and sheltering in place and figuring out next steps, right now as we continue on the road, this is the perfect time for Christ to be known to us, for Christ to make a resurrection appearance to us. I hope you'll spend some time this week thinking about what that might look like for you. But we had hoped. The disciples had hoped. if the result of all this chaos is far better than anything we could have hoped for or imagined? What if in this time we learn to rely on each other in new ways, really depend on each other to get through the hard times? What if we actually slow down, stop driving ourselves so hard? What if we learn to practice silence and stillness? What if, through this experience, we become a less anxious, calmer, more peaceful people? And what if we learn to recognize our connection with every single human being on the planet? What if we finally let go of our selfishness, our arrogance? What if we start making choices that are inconvenient for us, but life-giving for our siblings all around the world? And what if we become healthier, happier, more fit, more in tune with our emotional and physical needs? What if we actually learn to ask for help when we need it? What if our children become strong, resilient, flexible, easily able to adapt to new challenges and new situations? And what if our commitment to our life together in this community becomes stronger? If we realize that we cannot do it alone, that isolation is killing us, and that life in community, life at Trinity, becomes a top priority in our lives. The disciples had hoped that Jesus was the one to redeem Israel, and when their hopes were dashed, they soon discovered more than they could have hoped for. Jesus came not just to redeem Israel, but to redeem the whole world. And so what if the things we had hoped for end up being meaningless and trivial? And what God gives us in this time is something so beautiful, so magnificent, that we could never have expected it, never have even known to have hoped for it. And so in these days, let us stay calm, keep the faith, be at peace, and keep putting one foot in front of the other, trusting, completely trusting that God has great things in store for us. None of our hopes and plans will ready us for the extraordinary future God has already prepared for us. Thanks be to God. Amen.